We'll do a review. We'll do a review in Lekutei Sichas in Chelek Tezvav. That's volume 15. This is the Sicha for Vayera and Chof Mar Cheshvan. The Rebbe brings down here the very famous story that the Rebbe has elaborated upon about the Rebbe Rashab beginning to cry when he was just a kid, child of 4 or 5 years old. And how come Hashem appeared to Avraham and he doesn't appear himself to him? And his father answered him that a tzaddik decides 99 years old to circumcise. So the Rebbe has talked about this lesson, but today the Rebbe emphasizes this idea that he was only 4 or 5 years old. The Rebbe says that the message is here. We know the Rebbe will bring down that a 6-year-old already has, to a certain extent, changes the status from being a young child to somebody who can be educated. And the Rebbe says saying that he was 4 or 5 means to emphasize he was under 6. And still, the lesson is that each and every one of us, of our children, not only if in maturity level or their knowledge in Torah, they're like a 5 or 4-year-old, but even in physically, those who are only 4 or 5 years old, yet you can imbue them with such a yearning that they should cry. Why does Hashem not appear to them? That should be something, instead of naturally a child at that age wants a candy or something sweet. But if the education is properly, that's why we were taught about it, is that they can have them, these children at that age want even something as lofty as seeing Hashem, to the extent that it bothers them that they cry that they want that. That's the message over here. And also the answer is not that you have to be like a tzaddik, but once to get to that level of seeing Hashem, but once this thing has been opened up by Avraham Avinu, the child itself can actually reach the level of having Hashem appear to him. And the Rebbe brings down another story of the Rebbe Rashab, in which the tailor had a piece of the material in his pocket, and he got very embarrassed when the Rebbe Rashab took out that piece, and it bothered him terribly that he was crying bitterly. And then he came to his father asking how to make up for this, and his father said, "What happened?" And he wouldn't tell him the story because he said it's bad enough. He told his mother, bad enough that I embarrassed him. I don't want to talk Lashon Hara about him. And so the Rebbe learns from this also how the child was imbued with such a young age, with such character traits, and to such adherence not to want to hurt anybody. And that is applicable today, as we'll see in the Sikha, but let's go step by step. Vayera Chof Mar Cheshvan. Aleph. B'kesher mit Chof Mar Cheshvan, in connection to the 20th of Cheshvan, the Yom Haledes V'Chak Admur Rashab Nishmos Eden. That's the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab Nishmos Eden. Hat kveit Kedushas Meirichom Admur der Zelt. So my father-in-law, the Rebbe, he related a sipur from Baal Yom Haledes, a story from the birthday, whose birthday it is, of the Rebbe Rashab. Was hat passiert, when is given a kind, that took place when he was a child, von 4 oder 5 Jahre. He was 4 or 5 years old, and this took place b'Shabbos Parshas Vayera, during the Shabbos of the portion of Vayera. The Rebbe Nishmos Eden is rein zu sein Zeden. The Rebbe Nishmos Eden, the Rebbe Rashab, came to his grandfather, Kveit Kedushas Admur HaTzamach Tzedek, that is the Rebbe, the Tzamach Tzedek, to mekabel sein de bracha b'shaychus mit sein Yom Haledes, to receive the blessing in connection to his birthday. Und hat sich von anderen gewähnt. As he came in there, he began to cry. Zogendik, while saying, "Pavos hat sich der Eibishter bewiesen zu Avraham Avinu." How come Hashem appeared to our father Avraham, und zu uns, and to us, or parentheses, him, or to him, beweist sich nicht, he does not appear. Hat ihm der Tzemach Tzedek geantwortet, so Tzemach Tzedek answered him, as a Yid Tzadik, when a Yid who is a righteous, so 99 secure, at the age of 99 years, is machlit, as der darf sich mal sein, decides that he needs to circumcise, is wert, as der Eberster soll sich beweisen zu ihm, he is worth it, that Hashem should appear to him. That's the story. And Ois Beis, the Rebbe will say that this is not just a story, but this is a story which the Rebbe said to publicize, meaning that it has a lessons to us. And we need to take the lesson. And the Rebbe is going to say specifically, even under the age of 4 or 5, you can be at the level and have children feel that they want Hashem should appear to them to the extent that it touches them to the extent that they cry about it. Beis, Mochingeret, come upon him. We already spoken many times, wegen die Heiroes in Avodas Hashem, about the lessons in the service of Hashem. Was me ken arois nemen von dem dozikun sipur that we can take out from this above, from this story. The Allah sipure Rabbeinu Nisienu, as all of the stories of our Rebbes, our leaders, that had reached us, the stories that we know about. Especially, we need to learn service in Hashem, especially those which they themselves publicized. They have lessons for each and every one. So this is not just a story, and a nice story, but this has a story that is publicized to us to teach us. It has a lesson for us. But the Rebbe said we will stop on Itztef Nocha Nekuda in dem Sipur, an additional point in this story. Kveit Kedushas Merichome Admur, my father-in-law, the Rebbe, had medayigmen, very specifically emphasized beim der Zählen dem Sipur when he related the story, as der Bal Yom HaLedes, that the birthday, the Rebbe Rashab, is dann given a kind von 4 oder 5 Jahren, that he was a child, either 4 or 5 years. Und wie bald das der Dibur von Anossi bi Yisrael, since the speech, when a leader, a prince in Israel, when the Rebbe says something, every word that he says is precise. So there's something to be learned from this fact that he says 4 or 5. Ubefrat was red barabim, especially what the leader says publicly, speaks publicly. When he's the noch abdruk, and then he instructs to publish it. Is sicher ausgerechnet und medug betachlis. So everything is calculated and is precisely, totally precise. Darf man sagen, so therefore we need to say, as euch der Prat von Sipur, that also this detail of the story is nicht nur zu herausbringen the Gadlus von Rebbe Nishmos Eden. It's not just to tell us the greatness of the Rebbe Nishmos Eden, that because even though he was so young and still it bothered him. It's more than that. If simply telling us the greatness of the previous Rebbe, as afilu gor bekatnusei, that even when he was very young, it bothered him. How come Hashem does not appear to him? And this took him to such an extent until he started to cry. That's how much it bothered him. And this shows in the greatness of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that being a youngster, being under only 4 or 5, and yet he had such desire to see Hashem that it caused him to cry. But there's more than that. That's it. But this is also a lesson in the service of Hashem for each and every one. Und davon ist verstandig. So from this is understood. As af al pi was der Sipur anthalt kamo v'kamo hoiros l'kol echad ve'echad. Canal, although the story contains many and many lessons for each and every one, not only for 4 or 5-year-olds, but we can learn from what took place, as the Rebbe spoken, learned for everyone. Is aber ikar hayra, but there's also a main lesson for diva zainin in them gil ben daled and ben hey shona, those who are in the age of 4 or 5 years old, because that was the age. So there's a lesson for that age, children in that age who are 4 or 5. Now, sometimes when we say a child of 4 and 5, that's figuratively meaning a person in his level of education is a 4 or 5-year-old, which means he doesn't know much, but he can be an adult. The Rebbe wants to emphasize here that this lesson is actually for a 4 or 5, literally, physically, who's only 4 or 5 years old. Unit nor zu agodl beshonim. It's not only to an adult in years, which on his spiritual standing is like a child of 4 or 5, who had not yet reached the full chinuch, only 4 and 5. This says that means that we're talking about a person azah was hotef hazeful kendas nit, a person that to such an extent doesn't have the level of knowledge, doesn't have das as nit nor was mitzad atzmei versteht. It's not only that he alone on his own doesn't understand, nor can euch nit aufnehmen hashpoa von a zweiten, he's euch nit. He can also not accept when somebody else gives him. He's a child who is not able to get chinuch yet. Or a 5-year-old is not only that he doesn't do it on his own, but he's not yet able to get chinuch. He's even, so that means that we're talking about, but maybe you think we're talking about an adult, but we're talking about somebody who on his level is a 4 or 5-year-old. Okay, that he can't even accept or does from somebody else. That's how immature he is on his spiritual level. And we're trying to say, as can monen, that also such a person who's just in such a level, still he can demand with an inner force, which is which is similar to the concept of crying, which means that it really internally bothers you, and it's a forceful matter. When you cry, that points to the fact that this item, what you're crying about, touches you with a with force, beyond his own limitation and measured. That's why you start to cry. So we're not only saying that this person, but he's still an adult. He can cry about the fact that that Hashem should appear to him. Bis, not just appear, bis to the extent that he pointed Avram Avinu. But it's more than that. The Rebbe wants to say that we're talking about physically a 4 and a 5-year-old. This is all good and fine. This would be a good hayra for an adult who is the maturity in the spiritual level to the age of 4 or 5, that he can also be crying and forcefully demanding and why Hashem doesn't appear to him, as the Eibster soll sich zu ihm verweisen, that Hashem should appear to him, bis to the extent, not just appear, wer hat sich bewiesen zu Avraham Avinu, to the extent just like Avraham Avinu. It wasn't just appearing, it was appearing like Avraham Avinu. How is that? So that would be, if that was the only lesson, but how could someone demand who is not yet at any level, who's is like a 4 and a 5-year-old? What's the reason? The Rebbe says in the bracket, about as Avram Avinu is from the Gimel of, since Avram, our father, is one of the 4 patriarchs. Of each and every one of the Jewish people in all generation is by Yedin Eden. So by every Jew, by Yedin Einam from the Bonnet, which is each one of the children. We're all children of Avram. Do Yerusha from Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov. Do Yerusha the Inyonim was given by the others. We have inherently those matters that were by the others. So therefore, that appearing, Hashem appearing to you, just like it was to Abraham, because we're descendants of Abraham, even though we're in a low spiritual level, yet we can demand that Hashem should appear to us just like he appeared to Abraham. But that's not really, there's more than that. But mainly the hero, the lesson that we want to learn is for actually literally who is a child who's only 4 or 5 years, literally. As euch im kemme mechanech sein beofen, because that he too can be educated in such a way as soll monnen betoikev, he should demand with force ad kidei bechia, to the extent that he cries, as the Rebbe says, soll sich zu ihm beweisen wie zu Avraham Avinu, that Hashem should appear to him as he did to Avraham our father. So the Rebbe challenges now this concept that he just brought out, that we can learn from a story that took place with the Rebbe Rashab, who was, even at his young age, he was still going to be a leader, the son of a leader. He was born into sanctity. How could we say that this is a message, a lesson for all of us? Gimel. One can ask, what kind of a comparison? How could we equate? How could there be a comparison between the Rebbe Rashab and jeden Yiddischen Kind and every Jewish child? The Rebbe's Nishmos Eden, Zaindik HaKodesh Mebeten, he was holy from the womb, from the stomach. He was a Nasi ben Nasi, he was a prince, the son of a prince, a leader, the son of a leader. So already in his young age, you can tell something of his greater greatness that is going to be coming later on, but even as a child, to what, as our sages tell us, butzin mikatve yediyah, that while the vegetables, they're just starting to sprout, so mikatve yediyah, you already know from that point when they begin what kind of a vegetable it's going to grow into, meaning a child that comes from such a family, we know already from the beginning what he's going to grow into. Mer bardas, the andere, already at that age, while at the age of 4 or 5, he had more intelligence than others, even than adults. So how we want to learn from what his behavior to us? How can we learn from him, from the Rebbe Rashab, as it relates to the education from jeden Yiddischen Kind, from every Jewish child? Der Shir HaChinuch is doch bechol tinek lefi charifose v'yidi ose. The Rebbe quotes here that from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, that what is the age, the measure, when is the shiur of education? Every child, according how sharp and how knowledgeable he is. So you can't say that everybody has the same level. It depends on the individual. How could we say that we can learn from the Rebbe Rashab, who was at such a high level, even at a small age, for all Jewish children? So why are we trying to learn? Now, the Rebbe says, well, we certainly we're told the story to give a message, a lesson. We can't say that this is only, or else why would we tell us the story? But yet, how could we apply it to such a young age, to physically young age, not only young age in in level, in knowledge, but to physically a young age, saying that you can be like the Rebbe Rashab. Although it's very clear, as mentioned earlier, as the Teuchen Hasipur that the contents of the story applies not only to a prince in Israel, a leader in Israel, but also to each and every one. As we said earlier, I'd spoken earlier, the story was told to us and publicized and written down, so there should be a lesson for us. As I said before, from them Gufa was Mahotim Sipur der Zelt Barabim, from the fact itself that this story was related in public. Und dann noch abgedruckt and then it was printed. Is a Reihe, so that's evidence. As das is nicht von den Yoni Hamnosi, this is not those aspects, the matter of the prince, of the leader, was Meshichmo Mailo Gavoye Mikolaom, quoting the Pasuk that from his shoulder and up in Shmuel Aleph, the Pasuk says, he is higher than all the people. So that means there are certain parts of the Nasi which he's beyond the people, and we can't learn from that. But the fact that we tell us the story, we relate it to us, that means that these are from the Inyonim, those are the matters that we could relate to, nor from Zayin Inyonim, but from his aspects to which each from the people, every one of the people has a connection to. So while that is true, we have to learn a lesson. But who says that the lesson needs to be for literally, physically children who are 4 and 5 years old? Maybe we're talking about figuratively adults that have knowledge like children. It would be sufficient to say, it would seem, that this is a lesson for those who are adults in years. Even not talking about adults that have complete and they're fully educated, but even those who spiritually have not yet fully been educated. Why do we need to say that this applies even to a minor, literally in years, somebody who's a child who's only 4 or 5 years old? Why do we have to take it to that extreme and say that this is the lesson from this story? Dalet. So the Rebbe will understand this by introducing was megefind kama v'kama shiurim b'inyan achinuch, that we find many and many shiurs, amounts, measurements with regards to education. The Rebbe is going to bring out that the age of 6 and under 6 is not just an educational how smart you are or not, but there's a change from before 6 and after 6. The fact that the Rebbe emphasized that he was 4 or 5 years old didn't say he was a youngster while he was a child. So it means the Rebbe wanted to emphasize the fact that he's under 6. The Rebbe explains now how the age of 6 is a unique age, which is not really associated how smart the child is, but rather with just the fact, just like bar mitzvah, it doesn't depend on how smart the child is. If you're very smart, even though if you're not bar mitzvah, you don't count for the minyan. Doesn't matter that you can be smarter than a lot of the adults, but because over there, something of age requirement. The same thing, the age of 6 is an age requirement, and under 4, and age of 4 or 5, you don't have that age requirement, and that's the emphasis over here. So the Rebbe says, although that the measure for chinuch, education, as quoted before, is according to every child, according to their how sharp they are, and how much knowledge they have. However, there are several matters. There's a matter that we tie to a specific set age, not just how smart you are. Then you have this general halacha, as botzir mibar shit loy tekabel, under 6 years old don't accept in the academy, in the learning over the Gemara said. But Bar Shit, once he is 6, Kabil v'sofi lekitur, accept him and stuff him like an ox, which means just full force, to give knowledge to this child once he reaches the age of 6. But not before 6. Before 6, don't even accept him. As der limud atoyne mitat kotten in an oifen von sofile kiture, when to start learning Torah with a minor in such a way that you got to stuff him like an ox, push it down hard, was does bring to a hechere shleimus bechinuch b'chlal, which brings to a higher wholesomeness in education in general. Kibuvan has understood that this is not just regular teaching, but this is giving a lot. That's the expression. Stuff him like an ox, meaning bringing a lot of heitzuchon erst by barshit. But this only begins at the age of 6. Und hagam as euch in dem inyan zokmen. Also, with regards to this idea, when to accept and when to start stuffing Sofile Ketura, like an ox, giving him so much, Zokmen Adosis Tolui in Koyach Habenu Binyan Gufei. This hinges on the strength of this son and the build of his body, making sure that he's healthy. And one who is lean, Vartman Biski Ben Sheva, then you need to wait until he's about 7. So there might be a upper shear that you can't start at 6, you got to wait to 7. But under 6, it doesn't matter. Even if he's very developed and very smart, you're still not going to go into that level. But under 6, you don't accept. Even if he's a strong child. Nochmer, being anderer was Shenki Ben Sheva, he can be even stronger than another one who's already a 7-year-old, but still you're not going to take it. Thus haste, that means to say, as the shir from Bar Shirt, benegayet zum inyan from Sofile Kitura, the age of 6, as it is related to this idea of stuffing him like an ox, that level, shleimus achinuch, which is the higher, the wholesomeness in education, is nit totally in das v'koyach hakoten. That is not hinged on the mind, on the knowledge and the power of the minors. Is al derech von shir ben yud gimel mitzvahs. This is similar to the measure of 13 to mitzvahs. There it doesn't help as afilu ben zol zayin hakotna bardas. Even if you have a minor who's under 13 and he is very knowledgeable, bardas God will be a very great, intelligent, mature, very much so. He's even more than another person who's an adult who already turned 13. Is a part of mitzvahs min haTorah. He's still going to be exempt. If you're not 13, you're exempt from mitzvahs of the Torah. You cannot combine them to a minyan, etc. Similarly, under the age of 6, you don't do that higher level, even if he's able to, even if he has the mind, even if he's developing maturity, even if his body is physical, we're not going to do it. So that means the age of 6 is the cutoff age before we can start the shleimus hachinuch, which is called the chinuch of Sofile Kitura, when stuffing him like hanax. And why is that? So the Rebbe says that this is something which, since it's connected to the Eibishter, it's not just hinges upon what you can do on your own. Before Matan Torah, over there, you were only able to connect to the level that you can accomplish on your own. So it seems that mostly it just worked by what your personal standing was. That's how we measured your ability of connection. But after Matan Torah, it's a connection that comes from Hashem. And Hashem determines when is the age by which that connection can be made. So 13 for a bar mitzvah, to be an adult for part of a minyan, and 6 at the time when we can do the shleimus hachinuch. Let's look inside. The Hasbara in them is verbunden. The explanation in this is tied mit an Auftu von Matan Teure with what was accomplished, the novelty of Matan Teure in the Avodah in Teure Mitzvahs, Lifnei Matan Teure, in the service of Teure Mitzvahs as it was before the Teure was given. What was the novelty? What took place? The mitzvahs, the mitzvahs and the service before Matan Torah, they can only reach until the root of the created being. They can go, the highest level is from their root. And the far is in the Reif genug, so that's why for that it was sufficient. It was only important. Nor the shleimus ha'odam hanivra. It was only important the wholesomeness of the human being, the created being, b'avodasi yisbarach, through in the service of Hashem, because it was all hinged on the person, on what he can do, what he can accomplish in his avodah. Was durch dem hat der mamshech gewen elokus. Through his avodah, the person was able to draw down godliness mishorshe da hanivra mekoira, from the root of the created being and from his source. Aber es ist nicht gewesen a so viel negeya, but it wasn't so important in welchen Eufen, in which way, mit was faragashmi, with what physical kiyetzebay, to David the mitzvah. We didn't even care the material, the physical item that you do the mitzvah. Like today, we have to do the mitzvah tafke with tefillin in order to be mamshe, because it's connected to above. But in the days of the Ovis, before Matan Torah, you can do tefillin lav davke with physical tefillin. And it's not so important because you're not getting from a higher place than you're just doing what you can. It doesn't matter whether you're doing it with tefillin or you're doing it with the sticks, with the maklis, was the far. That's why our father Yaakov accomplished to draw this down, Sha'idei Tefillin. That which comes down through Tefillin today, he didn't need Tefillin specifically through his service. When he placed the maklis over there as the Torah, related to the Torah, he paid them with the tzoin. So that was, as explained to Zohar, that was the Avodah of Torah mitzvahs then in the level of whatever, expressed the maklis, that was okay. But because over there, you can only bring down from your source, and therefore it doesn't have to manifest itself as something unique, especially which only Hashem says that this is the way to bring it down. Noch Matan Torah, as opposed to the service of Torah, which is after Matan Torah, is mamshich from Maitzel Baruch Hu Shalomayla Mesherish Hanivroim. This draws down from the Maitzel, blessed be He, which is higher from the root of created being. Was di hamshoche ken anivro nit oifto mitzad atzmo. That drawing down a created being cannot accomplish on its own to bring from the Maitzel, from higher than Nivroim. He can't, from Hashem, you can't bring that down. You can only bring, you need Hashem's command, nor valazoi hoder Maitzel oizgestol, but that is the way the Maitzel set it up. As when metut mitzvah ploinis verde hamshocha for Maitzel lemata, when you do a specific mitzvah, that's how you bring down the hamshocha from the Maitzel below. So therefore, this hamshocha is accomplished specifically when the mitzvah werd giton b'diuk, when this mitzvah is done precisely, late the medidas v'shiurim, according to the measures, and the shiur was einen gegeben geworden milmayla by Matan Torah, and the shiur that were given from above by Matan Torah. You can't use maklos to do the mitzvah of tefillin. You can only do it because you're bringing down from the Maitzel, and the Maitzel comes down in the way the Maitzel has determined. What Hashem determined, that will bring it down. And the Rebbe says, actually, today A tzaddik like Yaakov could also use maklis, but he won't get the maitzil. He'll only be mamshich from sheresh and ivroim. Yesh lo imar azoichitz. We can say that also now, when eso zayna tzaddik v'Yaakov Avinu, if there is possible to be a tzaddik like our father Yaakov, can that oifton duruch maklis, so he can also accomplish through these sticks the Yaakov atov giton, as Yaakov is accomplished. So, in other words, to have the hamshacha through sticks as Yaakov did, you can have today too, if somebody's at that level of Yaakov. But that only is bringing down from the root of the created being, like them from them tzaddik, based according to the greatness, how great the service of this tzaddik. That's what you bring down. Says nito in them hamshachas hamaitzel, but there is no bringing down the maitzel Hashem. But this is the aveda for noch matan Torah. That's the aveda of after matan Torah. So therefore, there are certain conditions that we need to meet in order to be able to be mamshach from the maitzel. That applies to a 13-year-old, and that applies to a 6-year-old for the shleimus hachinuch that you get by the age of 6. Val derech zeh is benegeya the shiurim from zman hachiv, and same thing is the measures. That is, when is the time of obligation? Those vos es ken zayin akotten abardas godel yoser via godel bishonim. This that it's possible that a minor should have more intelligent, more mature than somebody who's older in years. Is thus nor benegeya shleimus shaloi. That only as it affects it, it's important to his own wholesomeness shalanir of the created being. But as it relates to the matters of the Torah hamshachas hamaitzel, to bring down Hashem, is doa medida melmailo. For that there is a measure that is given from above. As dois hebt sich on erst beim Alter von Yud Gimel Shana. That only begins when you are 13 years old. Similar when it comes to education. When we talk about the wholesomeness of education, to the extent the sofile ketura that you stuff him like an ox is from Barshit is only when he's 6 years old. So now what we said is the age of 6 is the cutoff date from when you start shleimus ha chinuch, and the Rebbe emphasized here that he was 4 and 5, that he wasn't 6 years old. So that means that there's a lesson here for being 4 and 5 before you're 6 years old, not just when it was a minor. From this, we also understand, as far as our matter discussing here, as the Rebbe Nishmos Eiden, since the Rebbe Rashab is done given, that time was Botzir Mibarshit, he was under 6. Is nit kukendik of sein gadlus in das v'chulu. So notwithstanding that he was great in his intelligence, shoinim yener elter, even though he was at a young age, is ober noch alt benigel in yondim matan Torah. So still, as it relates to the matters of matan Torah, given in adarge from botzir mibarshit, he was still in a level that he was under 6. He didn't pass that guideline, which comes from above, to be mamshich from above. He hasn't reached the wholesome level of chinuch. Since when the previous Rebbe publicized this story, which proves to us, points to the fact it is not something specific for leaders of Israel, because why would he publicize it for everybody? Kiniska said before. The Rebbe emphasized to also tell us that detail. As the Rebbe Nishmas Eiden is given a kind from 4 oder 5 Jahre, that the Rebbe Nishmas was a child for 4 or 5 years. Is verstandig. So then we understand that das ist shayches zu jedem Yiddish Kind, that this applies to every Jewish child. Was is Botzimi Barshit, which is under 6 years old. That's why he brought it out. He bowed as a pider medida von Torah Semes. because based on the measure of Torah Semes, not being 6 years old is just a sheer. Doesn't matter how mature he is. Is that in demselben Sug b'dargas hachinuch, you're still, anybody who's under 6 is in the same category of chinuch as the Rebbe Rashab, and yet we're telling us this story for a 5 and a 6 year old, for a 5 or 4 or 5 year old, and under 6 year old, the story of the Rebbe Rashab, which he is in the same category as the Rebbe Rashab, as relevant to the Amshocha that comes with Milo. And the Rebbe points to now that this actually gives us a whole nother perspective and a novelty in what it means to educate a child, that it actually educates him in a way that goes against the inherent nature of the child, which is normally to be excited and to love physical, material things, gash music, sweets. And here we change that around into that he loves Hashem, that he cries, that he wants Hashem. Zayin. Alpiyam now, based on the above, as mit mefarsim zayin dem sipur, the publicizing this story is the Rebbe given oisuna heiroa. The Rebbe meant a lesson in the chinuch for nakotn kipshutei, in how the education from literally a minor. But when I verstehen in them sipur, so now we'll also understand how in this story it lies in this. This is not just a general lesson in the service of Hashem, so even for minors, not a chidush ikri, but a very main novelty, a principled main novelty in the, as it relates to the way of chinuch. Says you do of us that Rambam is ma'arich b'negoya dem oifen halimud mitakot. It's known how the Rambam goes into great length how you should study with a minor. As mendarfi mezarezain, you need to encourage him b'dvorim shehem ahuvim etzle lekatnos shonov, with those matters that he loves, that are loved to him because of his young age. As such, if you will read, I will give you nuts, etc. Because of his few years, he's young, and the weakness of his intellect, he doesn't understand that good. So that's, the Rambam says, the normal process is to try to win over the child by offering him nuts and physical things that he likes. And here we're saying, then here we're demanding from a child, as imzol ondernemen, that's what should touch him, what should take him, what should get him. To the extent that he starts to cry, nit not something which is physically good, nor favos that Eberster beweist nit zu ihm, but rather why Hashem, what bothers him is why Hashem does not appear to him. Das heißt, that means as man darf mechanech sein a kind, that you need to educate a child as Gettlichkeit soll werden a Teil von sein Leben, that godliness should become part of his life. Dvorim shehem ahuvim esle should be loved by him. When we're telling you the story, you have to cry for Hashem's appearance, means that you have to change around. Instead of the natural liking is for nuts and things that are physical, he should want, you educate him that godliness should become part of his life. That's what's beloved by him. So you should bother him very strongly, was that that Hashem does not appear to him. In them oifen, and to the way and in this style, just as he appeared to Avraham Avinu, he wants to have that same level of appearance of Hashem. And the Rebbe explains now, this is only possible, this lesson, since it happened with the Friedrich Rebbe. If it never happened, we don't know if that's something that can be expected of a child. But once the Rebbe did it and he opened up the tzinner, then everybody is a lesson for everybody that can able to do that. If that's their story did not happen with the Rebbe Rashab, so we can't know. You can't poil on a feel whether we can impact such a feeling by jeden Yiddish kind, by every Jewish child. But because since naturally he's drawn kinal Rambam, as the Rambam says earlier, to dvorim gashim into physical matters. Darf man ihm mechanech sein, mezareh sein. Then you need to educate him and you need to encourage him with those matters that are love to him, and those are nuts and things like that. But after this story happened, especially after the as the Friedrich Rebbe, my father, the Rebbe, or their child related. This story, this happening publicly, and he instructed to print it, is a dover butter. This is very clear, this matter, as their mitot memegaligiven, that way it was revealed. Not only revealed, but actually you say them as a pesach event. They opened up a new pipeline, and a pathway in the level of chinuch. As it's now, after the story and after we publicize this, is now the chinuch the boy through a proper chinuch kenmen it's. So now we have the power poidet sein the gidrei hateva von idische Kinder. You can break through the limitations, the boundaries of nature of Jewish children. Unser Eingewöhnungen, to get them used to Tzevel Ruchni, is to want spirituality. Bis zu a Rusruf Bazea Chuk the floor, to the extent that you bring out by them a wondrous yearning, as der Eberster soll sich zu sehen beweisen, that Hashem should appear himself to them. Beshas men zet a Yiddish kind was im artnit, and when you see that there's a Jewish child that doesn't care, was der Eberster beweist sich nicht zu ihm, that Hashem doesn't appear to him, is es nicht, weil is nicht shaykh to them. It's not because it doesn't really apply. He cannot. It's not something which he can connect to. Nor weil der mechanech redt nicht bozeh, but it is the fault of the one who's educating, that he's not speaking to him. Words that come from the heart, and that's why the child doesn't react that way. So if he's not, you don't see the child wanting this spirituality, that crying from not seeing Hashem, that is not the child's fault, because the child is able to do that. Once we have the opening and the story of the Rebbe Rashab as related by the Friedrich Rebbe, but it's the fault of the educator. So we have to train and educate our children to that level. Up to here, we were discussing how the lesson from what took place with the Rebbe Rashab being a 4 and 5 year old applies to all the 4 and 5 year old children, that we can educate them, that they should have that same level of conviction and desire, to the extent that they cry that they want to see Hashem. And we can do that even literally by 4 and 5 year olds under the age of 6. Now the Rebbe is going to explain how the answer that the Tzemach Tzedek gave the Rebbe Rashab to the fact that he was crying that he wants to see Hashem as well, that it's not just an answer saying that Avraham Avinu, who was a tzaddik, who circumcised at 99, is deserving. So then he should have said it in short, that he was a tzaddik. It doesn't apply to us. The fact that he goes through the details that he circumcised, he deserved, that means to say that the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, was teaching him that this actually applies to us as well. If we decide to circumcise ourselves as did Avram, then we can actually merit to see Hashem. Hey, Ches. Similar as the lesson of the question and the crying of the Rebbe Rashab is to jeden Yiddish kind kinal barucha, is to every Jewish child, as earlier at length explained. And likewise, it's also understood as the entfer von Tzemach Tzedek zum Rebbe Nishmas Eden. The answer that Tzemach Tzedek gave to the Rebbe Nishma Seiden, as Aida Tzadik to 99 Yor is Machlit as a Dav sich mal sein, that a Yida Tzadik, when he's at age 99, decides that he needs to circumcise, is a wert as the Eibishter soll sich beweisen zu him, he deserves that Hashem should appear to him. So this was the answer that the Tzemach Tzedek gave, is thus an entfer b'meile shaykh. So this is an answer, and therefore it applies zum chinuch von jeden Yiddishkin, to the education of every Jewish child, that answer that he gave is applicable to everybody. So the Rebbe is going to go through now, how does this apply? The pshat in entfer von Tzemach Tzedek, the meaning of the answer of the Tzemach Tzedek is doch, doesn't mean as der Eibishter hat sich bewiesen nur zu Avram. Doesn't mean that God appeared only to Avram because he was deserving, while hat Machlit given to 99 Yor, because he decided at the age of 99 years old, as darf sich mal sein, that he needs to circumcise. Aber as zu andere, but others, ubefrat bedugmas der Rebbe Nishma Seiden, especially the, for example, the Rebbe Nishma Seiden, it doesn't really apply to him because he's not in that category. He's not 99. He didn't decide to be machlit. He's not either tzaddik of the, as the answer over there. If that would be the case, if that what the Tzemach Tzedek meant with his explanation to the Rebbe Nishma Seiden, but then the Tzemach Tzedek it have to answer from Bekitzer, because in that case the Tzemach Tzedek should have briefly answered, as man kann sich nicht gleichen zu Avraham Avinu, that you cannot compare yourself to Avraham Avinu. He's asking why Avraham Avinu earned that. You say because that he was Avraham Avinu, we can't compare himself. The fact that the Tzemach Tzedek explains in detail why he deserved, that means that that's the way to actually also explain how we can actually achieve to actually also see Hashem. Now the pshat is, the meaning is, that this is a lesson and how each one can reach to Vayera Elov Hashem, that Hashem should appear to him. Through the decision. As in welchen matzev ruchnim soll nor sein. Any such spiritual standing situation you find yourself, wherever you are. Afila men is a tzaddik in alter for 99 years, even if you're a tzaddik at the age of 99 years. Darf men sich mal sein. You need to circumcise yourself. Das meint. What does that mean? Men darf sich bevornen. You must caution yourself and put in lots of effort to remove the cover, the blockage and obscurity that the world provides, to remove it, cut it away, bimal, to circumcise, to remove that cover. That feeling to remove the obscurity and what blocks, the world blocks over Hashem, that is something which is applicable to each and every one of the Jewish people. Applies to each and every one of the Yidden. Warum Chochas Avram is given at Tzadik zu 99 Yor. Although Avram was a righteous person at the age of 99, they were complete, as it says, Avram Baba Yomim. Avram Zokim Baba Yomim, that he came full with days, Yomim Shleimim, the days were all full, as it says in the Zohar. Bavidosi is Baruch, his service of Hashem. And therefore, his Zayin Achlote as a Dav Zich Mal Zayin. So his decision that he needs to circumcise himself, which means even after such a great avodah, and even after such full days and such greatness in his service, he still must circumcise himself, which means to protect himself from the obscurity that the world shouldn't block. So it's a feel chidush. So that's a much greater novelty to need to do that Vidachlote von dem was is nit kin tzaddik, then the decision for somebody who's not a tzaddik, known that you need to circumcise, that you shouldn't allow for the world to obscure and block on the sense of Hashem in the world. So that is something which Avram Avinu is needs to do it. Every Yid needs to do it. That's obvious. But the thing is, it gets easier after Avram has started this off. But you're doing the minyan from Pesach. It's known in the idea when we talk about somebody opened, somebody started. As after someone put a lot of effort in a certain matter, and he brought it down into the world, is there that way he opens up the pipeline of blessing for others, as the noch kennen them inyan, that later on they too can reach that same level, the same idea, mitfil vinziker yigia, with much less effort. That opened up the pipeline for others, but then they are able to get it. They don't need that much effort because somebody already started it once the person put in all the effort. And how much more so when we talk about after the Torah was given, that you can accomplish through a much smaller and much easier service to accomplish this. Those was the obvious of Evgiton, that which the forefathers, they needed to put a lot of work, a lot of great effort into it. Now, once they started it and once they did it, for us it becomes easier, but we must do it as well. So that's the lesson for us. How does this apply specifically to a child that we said who has this great yearning and was educated in a way that seeing Hashem is important to him? Comes the response that even though you have that desire, you need to circumcise. Test. Well, this is the hero for the Tzemach Tzedek's answer. This is the lesson of the response of the Tzemach Tzedek to the Rebbeinu Shalom. How come Hashem appeared to Avraham and not to him? And the response is B'inyan Achinuch Oich Tzu Ketanim. And the lesson is here in the subject of education also to minors. Noch dem wie men ruft arois beim Kind, the Chukaniflo, after calling out, bringing out by the child this wondrous yearning. As the Eibishter soll sich beweisen zu ihm, that Hashem should appear to him, darfen ihm asber sein, you need to explain to him, as the derech lezeh, what is the path to this? Is durch der achlote, is by the decision, as men darf sich allemol mal sein, that we need to always circumcise. Sich bavorenen und aropnemen dem helem vehester ha'olam, to forewarn yourself and to remove that block and obscurity of the world. So this is the response that the child needs to be explained, that how do you actually fulfill that yearning? You have to circumcise yourself. What does that mean? Das meist, that means that you need to educate a child, need zu nicht nispol werden, not to be impacted from Helem v'Hester ha'Ilam, from the block and obscurity of the world. If ihm soll nicht poil sein, that it should not affect the child sein, was Welt sagt, what the world says. You don't care what the world needs to be circumcised. You need to remove yourself. You need not care what others say. Nor was Torah will, just that what the Torah wants. Und die achlote is by him, and this decision is by him, so sein so stark, should be so strong, bis to the extent gam ki yaskin layosur mimenu. Also, when he becomes old, it will not leave him. Das is by him azoy eingewurzelt. This is so rooted as gedenkt allemaal, that he always remembers. Even after he's in a higher, in a much, much higher level in the service of Hashem. As a muzik mal sein, that he always must circumcise himself. Und das bringt, and this brings that decision and that education and that level to know the commitment to remove the worldly opinion from his dedication, and to the extent that he always committed to it, even when he's old, it stays with him. So that commitment bringt as Shem Katnuse, that even at his young age, by him Zayin, Vayera elav Havaya, Hashem should appear to him. Was dos beleicht ihm mit sein Zwiebel in an Eifel, that illuminates him and his environment in an Eifel in such a way, V'hoy von V'hoyo Havaya L'cho L'oir Elam, that Hashem will be to you the light of the world. So not the world will tell you, but the world will be what Hashem, the light of Hashem, Vayera of Hashem. Hashem is in the world, and you see Hashem in the world. That is the light of the world. And the world, with its own ideas, is cut off, and you have Vayera of Hashem, the appearance of Hashem. The Rebbe goes on not to say that this idea that we're talking about, appearance of Hashem, also applies further to another story with the previous Rebbe, in which it applies to Ben Adam Lachaverei, how he treated people with the utmost, and that special education that we have the ability, once the Rebbe Rashab story that was revealed by the Frierdiker Rebbe, the new expectation of education, that also applies how a child can be educated, has also in the level of between Ben Adam Lachaverei, between a person and his friend, a whole new level of education in which a child is educated, that his essence, that he doesn't allow for any weakness or any failures in Ben Adam Lamokim, as the story that took place with the Rebbe Rashab, as the Rebbe goes on now. Yud kishem v'Rabbi Seinu Nisienu, just as our teachers, our leaders, haben Pesach given at Sinner Chodesh, they opened up a new pipeline. Binyan HaChinuch B'negei Ben Adam Lamokim, in the area of education as it relates between a person and Hashem, which means as it's can mechanech sein idische Kinder, that now we have the ability to educate Jewish children zu gelusten in yonim nor gelusten in yonim von Yiddishkeit, to yearn and to want only matters of Yiddishkeit, need to live schar chulu, not for reward nor in an oifen as they the inyonim, that these all these matters werden a teil von their leben, they become part of their life, bis as far as they to the extent that we're educating today that these things of godliness, that should be part of their life, that not wanting other ulterior motives, not wanting rewards, just to want to be connected and wanted to want Yiddishkeit to the extent to the extent that it bothers them, to the extent that it makes them cry. Why Hashem does not appear to them? As he appeared to Avraham Avinu. So we find similar to this point in Inyanim Sheben Adam Lachaveira, also in matters that are between man and his friend. Also in a story of the birthday celebrating the Baal, the master of the Yom HaLed is the one whose birthday Rabbi Rashab of Chafov in the days when he was young. When the Rebbe Nishmosi Ein Nizgven Ben Dalet Shonim, when the Rebbe Rashab was 4 years, hat a Molder Schneider gebracht, the tailor brought a beged, a garment was hat genäht for Ima Rabbonis that he was sewing for his mother, for the Rebbetzin. Sewing it for the Rebbetzin, the wife of the Rebbe Marash. When they inspected the garment, so the Rebbe Nishmos, he took out innocently a chatikas beged from the Schneider's keshen, a piece of garment of the tailor's pocket. The Schneider hat sich verschämt. The tailor was embarrassed. When hat sich angeben verantworten, he started to excuse himself as hat vergessen wegen der Stickelschreude, that he forgot about this piece of material. Was is by him geblieben, that was remained by him, etc. He was excusing himself, as looked like he was trying to steal that piece of garment, part of the beged. The Nochas, the Schneider is weggegangen. Then, when the tailor left, hat ihm Imai Harabonis ausgerät, so his mother talked to him about it, and she admonished him. Asulibim is the Schneider Fashem geworden, that because of him, the tailor was embarrassed. When the Rodos gehört, when he heard this, hat sich bitter voneinander gewesen. So very bitterly, he was sobbing and crying. In etliche Wochen herum, several weeks later, is reingegangen zu seinem Vater. He went into his father, the Rebbe Maharash, to the Rebbe Maharash. Und bei ihm gefragt, he asked him, how can one fix the oven from Albonas Ponim, the sin of shaming somebody? When his father asked him, why are you asking this question? Hat geantwortet, as will das wissen, he just wants to know. Neither telling thereby was what passiert. He didn't want to tell his father what happened. As immer Rabbonis hat him gefragt, when his mother, the Rebbetzin, asked him, hat nicht gewollt erzählen dem Taten die ganze Meise, why he didn't want to relate to his father the entire story. Hat geantwortet, so his answer was, sie ist genug, was is nichshel geworden in Halbonas Ponim. Sufficient that he stumbled in shaming somebody, whitening somebody's face, embarrassing them. So he should also violate, transgress, speaking evil and Loshen Hora. Yudalef. But the Rebbe says, really, if you think about it, he didn't really do such a big thing, big Vayera, the Rebbe Rashab. First of all, it was innocently, he took out, he didn't mean to shame him. And here his father is asking him, it's even a question, he's not being respectful because he's not telling his father what he wants to know. And yet, the Frierdiker Rebbe would not do that in order not to speak evil or not to pass along something which maybe looked bad at the tailor. Yudala Bashkofer is showing us nitokin gewalt. At first glance, it doesn't seem to be such a wow, such a terrible thing. With regards to the shaming over here that took place. Vorum. That is Medayik in Sipur, as he specifically says in the story, the Rebbe Nishmos Eiden took that piece of garment innocently. He didn't have the says beshaking. That means accidentally. Und dazu noch, in addition to that, this wasn't done in a public forum. This nicht given by Rabbin. This wasn't publicly. Lois Ima Rabbonis is dabei given. Only his mother, the Rebbetzin, was there. Und von deswegen, and yet, wie nor hat hert. As soon as he heard, as the Schneider hat sich verschämt, his mother told him that the tailor was embarrassed. Or das im stark the Numen, that sort of really took him, crying bitterly. This was something so upsetting to him that he cried bitterly. Was das beweist doch the fact, this point, so why is he so upset? Azimot Fadrosen, what he was upset about is nicht so viel was the Albonas ponim is given durch him, not so much that he's the one that shamed, as him kommt an einish that he should be punished, nor that's Zach was bothered by the thing itself. Was Said is verschämt geworden, that Ayid was shamed. Und der Pfarrer hat nicht gewollt erzählen seine Taten wegen dem. That's why he also did not want to share it, to relate it to his father about it. Hagam does nicht entern Aviv of sein Shaila, even though not answering his father on his question, can efsher reingehen in Geder von Kibbutz Avkolo. This may go into the definition of honoring the father. Even if he would tell his father, would not be just to tell him Lashon, it was just because he wanted to fix his sin. But yet, while he couldn't tolerate the thing itself, as to be discussing and relating something not good about a Yid, in any way possible. That is what was the essence that was bothering. Since we were told this story, zusammen mit der Hadgoshe, and also with the emphasis, as the Rebbe Nishmos Eiden is dan altgeben für Yor, that the Rebbe Nishmos Eiden was only 4 years old then, is the Fun Arayes, from this is evidence, as it's kennen mechanech sein, that now we are able to educate yet that Yiddish kind, every Jewish child, are feeling them kill, even at that age, in Odom in such a way that you should not want to speak or shame anybody, even at the age of 4 years old. Yud Beis. From Kol Hanal Izoich der Limud, from all the above, we also learn how much the obligation is on each individual, the Jewish people, to mishtadel sein sich in inyan hachinuch, to put effort into the matter of education. Sai b'negeya eigene kinder, whether it affects, whether we're talking as it affects your own children. As the expression, the euphorism of the Bal Yom HaLedes, the Rebbe Rashab, that is very known. He said, "Otazoivi hanochas tefillin b'chol yom is a mitzvah deiraisa of jeden id." Just as placing tefillin, putting on tefillin every day, is a Torah command for every Jew. Onachilik tzi agodel b'toyra tzi aish poshut, without distinction whether you're a great learned man in Torah or you're a simple person, you still have to put on tefillin every day. That's a Torah command. So the Rebbe Rashab said that that's why it's also a complete obligation of jeden Eid and every Jew to trachten jeden Tag, to every day think a halbe shah, half an hour wegen dem Chinuch von Kinder, about the education of children. Und ton als was es ist bekoichai zu ton, and to do everything that it's in his power to do. Und yoser bekoichai, and even more than your power. Then poil sein by the kinder, to see, to impact, to influence the children as a zone gain in the derech was men is a madrich, so they should go on the path in which they're educated, that you are educating them, you're directing them. Sai, this is with your own children. Sai benigeya andere idische kinder, also with regards to other Jewish children, them as Elton Hobmeiz Siba Shatia, whose parents, or for whatever reasons, they need gegeben achinuch kideboyi, have not given them a proper education. Was dan leak der choiv al kocha Yisrael, on every sage and sage of Israel, to make sure those children who didn't have anybody, whose parents didn't educate them, so the sages are obligated, as the Rambam writes, zu versorgen, to make sure, as their kinzel bakumen achinuch kideboyi, that the child should get a proper education. Durch them, and through this, stellt men oiv the tzivas Hashem, that raises the armies of Hashem, as well, na reis gain from Golus, which will go out of exile. B'narenu b'skanenu goymer, with our youth and with our elders, b'banenu b'bneisenu, with our sons and our daughters, through Mashiach tzidkenu, through our righteous Mashiach b'korev mamash. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Vayera Chof Mar Cheshvan Tovshin Lamed Vav and the Tovshin Lamed Zayin.